So, as Anne mentioned, we are going to talk about the ocean today, and we're going to talk about the ocean sound. But first, I would like to start my presentation by thanking many people, especially my students, my postdoc, my graduate students, my undergraduate students, who all contributed to this project, and all the funding agencies, which ONR, Office of Naval Research, is one of the main funding agencies, and of course UW Bothell SRCP program, and UW RRF is also sponsors of this project. I would also like to thank the Ocean Observatories Initiative, which is an NSF-funded project that supports the infrastructure of the sensors and arrays that I'm going to talk about today. So let's start. We're going to jump into the ocean. What is the ocean soundscape? If you dive into the ocean underwater and you listen, you hear different sources, different sounds from different sources. That could be from anthropogenic sounds, man-made sound, or could be biological sound, many different things. I have a couple of examples here. For example, we can hear marine mammals. They're vocalizing all the time for communication, navigation, mating, and many other purposes. We can hear geological sound like earthquakes, volcano eruptions. We can hear bubbles that are being released from the sediment, could be methane bubbles, for example. We can hear fish also make sound, or we can hear what happens at the air-sea interface, which is the surface waves, storms, rain, wind. We can also hear ship noises, sonar activities, or airgun surveys. We can hear if there is any construction, we can hear them. We can hear pile driving. So these are all different type of sound that we can hear underwater. And that's why we use sound for probing the ocean, because it gets trapped between the ocean surface and ocean floor and can travel long distances. And when I say long, I really mean really long, like a few 100 kilometers. All the other waves dissipate so fast in water medium except sound that can travel. And that's why marine mammals, for example, use sound for most of their activities, because they can send their signals far. So we are going, my research, part of my research that I'm presenting today is on characterizing ocean soundscape, understanding the portion of the sound that is coming from each of these categories, and looking at the long-term trend. Is the ocean getting noisier or not, and why? So the data set that I use for this research is from the Ocean Observatories Initiative. It's an NSF-funded project that has different arrays of sensors all around the globe, as you see in this map. And there are multiple sensors collecting data in real time. Most of them are in real time. And we're going to focus on these two arrays that are off the coast of Washington and Oregon, Regional Cabled Array and Coastal Endurance Array, that UW and Applied Physics Lab are very involved in these instruments. There are more than 800 different types of instruments that are collecting data. This is the map of the hydrophones on these two scientific arrays that I'm using in this research. You see that there are mainly two clusters, one cluster closer to the shore and one cluster in deep ocean, which is around the axial seamount. It's the volcano seamount that we have in our area. So these are all the hydrophones. There are two types of hydrophones, low frequency and broadband. And the only difference is the frequency band that they focus on. What I'm showing here is the data coverage. So we have good data since 2015. This one goes up to 2021, but we will add 2022 in our analysis later. So this 6 years of data that we are looking at. In order to look at the data, if I don't say we were the first group, we were definitely one of the first groups who looked at the hydrophone data. So we had to develop our own codes to access data and to kind of like convert the data type to what is common in ocean acoustics. So my lab has developed a Python package called OOIPy. It's free, it's available, and we can use this Python package to access process and visualize the OOI hydrophone data. To just give you an idea about the environment that we're talking about, I'm showing the 2 clusters of hydrophone with circles here and showing shipping routes in the area. And you can see the Seattle is right here, Portland. And there is a main shipping route here connecting north to south that ships are going from British Columbia all the way down to California or even Mexico or southern than that. There's also a big shipping route here that connects the west coast of the United States to the east coast of the Asia. So as you can see, our hydrophones are in a high traffic regions, and we have collected multiple ship noises. We've also collected multiple earthquakes and volcano eruptions, and what I'm showing here is each dot represent an earthquake that happened in the past 6 years. And you see the axial seamount here, and the other hydrophones are shown here. And if you look at the location, most of the hydrophones are along the continental plate, the tectonic plates, and that's the Juan de Fuca plate that is meeting the North Pacific plate. So most of the earthquakes are happening in that region, but because sound can travel, we can hear earthquakes on the OI hydrophone data too. Here, just an example of the data. And when I say acoustics data, we all think about audio signals, which is correct, but we can convert the audio signal to images to look at the images to understand the frequency and temporal information in the signal. So what I mean by a spectrogram is this type of figure that we show frequency on y-axis, time on x-axis, and color represents how loud the signal is. So red means loud and blue means quiet. In this talk, I want to talk about the very, very high level of all different topics technically. But if you have any question, if you want to know more about each one, please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions during my talk. So this is just a sample spectrogram. This is 1 month of data in one of those locations. And I'm going to talk about what we can see here in this spectrogram. This band around 20 hertz, as you can see here, it's very loud. It's fin whale calls. Fin whales are vocalizing in that frequency and making noise, and we can hear them if we have a hydrophone underwater. These vertical lines, these are local shipping noises. When a ship is passing over the hydrophone, we can record the ship noise for a few hours on the hydrophone. So it's really loud. I'm going to listen to them in a few minutes. And this very low frequency energy is called microseism noise, and it's mainly due to the surface wave that is in all locations. The outline of this talk is mainly on, I have 2 parts. I want to talk about what we can do with single hydrophone data, and then I want to talk about what we can do with pairs of hydrophones. So these are, again, just examples of processes or analysis that we can do. This is a very rich data set. So with single hydrophone, I'm going to talk about long-term ocean ambient noise, and then I'm going to focus on 2 different noises, wind and rain. When I say long-term, I show you that we have 6 years of data, so we can create 6 years of spectrograms I'm showing 5 locations here. These are different locations on the map that I showed you. A lot of interesting things can be seen here. I'm going to talk about them. Like this band, it's 20 hertz band, as we just talked about. This is fin whale call vocalization, and you can see the seasonal pattern here, that it's getting louder in winter and quieter in summer, and that's because their migration pattern, that they are off the coast of Washington and Oregon, typically in fall to winter, and then go to higher latitude winter to summer and spring. So they get louder in winter. The other interesting thing is the low frequency energy, that the microseism that I told you, it's pretty noticeable in all hydrophone locations. And this energy that you can see in 2015, that's a vertical line that is so loud. I hope you can see, I can show them like here and here and here. This is in April 2015, and that is due to the axial seamount eruption. We were so lucky to start recording just a few weeks before the eruption happened, so we could capture that data. And then this big red area that you can see here is due to an Airgun survey that is conducted in the area for a few weeks. And if you're not familiar with Airguns, Airguns are a type of signal that people send downward so they can record the reflected signal from the seafloor, and they can process that to understand what is going on beneath the seafloor. So oil and gas company, for example, use this type of experiments for exploration, or we can use that for understanding the reason behind the earthquakes along the tectonic plates, for example. So that's from the Airgun experiment in the area. And many other interesting features here that I'm gonna skip. I'm going to just play a few examples of the sound so you can listen to them. So this is marine mammal vocalizations. We don't know exactly what type of a species, but there are multiple species. You can see the higher frequency band is very busy. The low frequency band is also some energy there. If you go to the next slide, that's Finwell vocalization, the 20 hertz energy that I just told you. So if you play that, you can hear. I have changed the sampling so you can hear it. Otherwise, 20 hertz, we won't be able to hear a 20 hertz signal. And this just goes for another couple of more minutes. So you can just move to the next one. It's a ship noise. This is because it's long. You can just fast forward to where the energy is high. Maybe, yeah, exactly right there. It's exactly like living close to a highway. And you can see the structure of the sound is so different. We have tonal signal here that is from the mechanical parts of the ships, that in biological signal, for example, we didn't have that type of structure. And next one is for the axial seamount eruption in 2015. Again, it's long. You can just fast forward to right there. And the next one is an airgun pulse. So it's like an explosion that you can hear. And this is just 18 seconds of data, but during seismic experiments, they fire air guns like every 18 seconds for a few weeks. So you can imagine how much noise we are adding to the ocean. And if you go to the next slide, I have a few audio in that, yeah. So these are all some other examples, but I just want you to play wind noise, yeah. You can clearly hear the wind, right? It's different from other examples. And rain. This is pretty high rain, 25 millimeter per hour. It's really heavy rain. That's good. Thank you, Sarah. Now I can share. Okay, so now we want to focus on rain and wind noise. So what we have is a hydrophone that sits on the seafloor. As you can see in this left image, there's a tripod and the hydrophone sits on top of that. And on top of that, at the surface, we have a surface buoy that has sensors for collecting weather data like rain, wind, and other instruments. So we are going to connect these two different data types together to understand underwater noise due to wind and rain. Going back to the map, the location, if you want to know the location, is the Oregon Shelf location, pretty shallow, 80-meter depth. We call this shallow location in future slides. And Oregon offshore, as you can see here, it's in deeper part. It's along the slope, continental slope, and it's at 581 meter depth. We call that deep location in the future slides. So we have analyzed more than 11,000 hours of wind noise at different wind speeds, and we have calculated the energy in frequency domain, not in time domain. You want to look at we technically take the Fourier transform of the signal and look at that. And what I'm showing here is the shallow location versus deep location, and each color represent a category of wind speed. So it starts from 0 to 2 meters per second and goes really high to more than 14 meters per second. A lot of things, we can discuss that forever, but just a few notes. Obviously, when the wind speed goes higher, the sound goes higher. So what you see on y-axis is the dB level. 80 dB is higher than like 50 dB, for example. So different wind speeds are generating different level of noise in the ocean. And the other interesting feature here in deep ocean is this maximum peak that you can see at around 50 hertz, which is not due to wind noise. It's due to distant storms and distant shipping, which are at higher latitudes probably, but they're propagating, and we're able to collect that in deep location in one of our hydrophones. We're not seeing that in shallow location because that shallow hydrophone is more closer to the coast and doesn't have access to the deep ocean sound channel. But we can look at each frequency band separately and with a model. That's what we did. We kind of like created a model that if we know the wind speed, we can estimate the energy or sound level, or vice versa. If we know the sound level, we can estimate the wind speed from that. And then we compared our data with other publications starting from 1960s, and then we find out that our data or our model matches very well with other data sets. And then we analyzed about 300 hours of rain data. And again, we got the same type of plot. But one interesting fact here is that underwater noise due to rain is not just a function of rain rate, it's also a function of wind speed. So if we have the same rain rate, but different winds, the underwater noise is going to be different. So what you see here is this is deep location at 2 to 5 millimeter per hour. This is shallow location for the same rain rate, but we have different lines, and each line is for the different wind speed category. Again, we're not going to get deep into the model, but we have different models for different frequency range, because it's clear that some frequency range are linear, some frequency range are not linear. I just want to look at the pair of the hydrophone. Now, if we have two hydrophones, what can we learn from the data recorded by two hydrophones? Obviously, with each individual hydrophone, we can process ambient noise, but we can calculate the cross correlation of these two time series and learn new things. This technique is called ocean noise interferometry, and it's not just used in the ocean. The noise interferometry technique can be used in other mediums as well. If we have two receivers, A and B, and if we have sources of noises around the hydrophone, by calculating the correlation between the sensor, the data recorded at A and data recorded at B, and averaging in time, we can estimate what is called the transfer function or time domain Green's function between the two hydrophones, which technically represent the environment between two hydrophones. So we're going to talk about that, but if you imagine as an environment like a black box, if you have a source or input and output, what is going on in that black box can be defined by time domain Green's function. So we're going to understand what is going on in the ocean between point A and B. So we're going to learn about the environment between A and B by calculating the correlation between the two signals. So we use two hydrophones. Both of them are at the caldera, the seamount, axial seamount caldera, 3 kilometers apart from each other. We do some sort of pre-processing to make the data clean and ready for cross correlation. We calculate the cross correlation. We average over 6 years. And this is the signal that we get. So what you see here is the impulse response, so time on x-axis and some amplitude on y-axis. This plot is supposed to be exactly a mirror because the positive time shows the arrival from eastern caldera to central caldera, and negative time shows exactly the same, but reverse time, so from central caldera to eastern caldera. And what you see here, if the hydrophone A is here, for example, eastern caldera here, central caldera here, these peaks are due to these arrivals. The first one at -2 is from the direct path. So there is a direct path connecting these 2 points together. The second one is this first surface reflection. Sound goes to the surface, reflects from the surface, and we can hear it at the second hydrophone. The next peak is from the surface, bottom surface reflection, and you can think about other reflections as well. So by correlation and averaging in time, we are learning about the environment between these two hydrophones. And I'm going to skip that. I'm going to look at the 6-year noise interferometry results. So what you see here is exactly what I showed you in a plot and versus time. So I just imagine that plot is rotated 90 degrees. So time now is on y-axis, but instead of average over 6 years, we're going to average over every 200 hours. So we can see how features are changing over time. The path are shown here. So this is the red line at about -2 seconds is the direct path. These two here are the surface reflections. This is the second surface reflection, and so on. But a lot of other things are going on here. And I don't have time to talk about all the different features, but just pick one of them that is very interesting. And that is the noisy part that we see here, here. So there's a seasonal pattern in the noise cross correlation coefficient. And if you look at the spectrogram of single hydrophone and just match those things, they always appear before fin-wheel vocalization. So we have fin-wheel vocalization around fall and winter on each hydrophone. We can see them, we can hear them, but a few months before they appear on the hydrophone, we can hear them on the cross correlation function. That's so amazing because when we look at the energy content, it's 20 hertz, so it should be from fin-wheels, but fin-wheels are not at this location at that moment. So if you kind of like find the direction of the sound, you will find out that this energy is coming from higher latitude close to Alaska, and it matches perfectly with the migration pattern of fin-wheels. When they're up here, we don't see their signal individually on each hydrophone, but because the signals is buried in noise. But by correlation and averaging in time, we can clearly see them, although they are a few 100 kilometers away in north, until they move to the south, so they get close to the hydrophone, and then now we can hear them clearly on the hydrophone data. So what we found here is that there is a constant 20 hertz signal in the ocean, always, that is kind of like shaking the ocean. So you can hear them, you can sense them all the time because fin-wheels are vocalizing, and because at that frequency, sound can propagate long distances, we can hear them everywhere. So I think I'm going to pause here and just to summarize, my goal was here to show you what we can do with underwater acoustics or ocean noise, and we can learn about each one of these features in more details, understand animals' migration pattern, the impact of man-made activities on animals, understanding the earthquakes propagation, understanding the storms, measuring wind and rain in isolated locations that we don't have access to satellite data, for example, or other type of instruments. So many things we can do with underwater acoustics. I hope I was able to show just a very small portion of that. So I'm going to stop here, see if there is any question, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Does someone have a question? Are there any questions?
So if the frequency goes up, the travel distance goes down.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Is that
yes.
a good assumption?
Yes. Yes. Because the loss is a function of frequency. So the loss will be more at higher frequencies. So if you look at the frequency of the correlation, it drops as frequency goes higher. So that's correct.
Thank you. So now when you try to measure the sound of rain at two different locations, one is deep and the other one is shallow, how would that affect those measurements, given that the frequency of the rain is about 1 kilohertz or something like that?
Yeah, it's a few kilohertz. And what we have is the hydrophone that is directly below the rain sensor, but at different depth. If you think about a cone, like a listening cone, that we are able to listen to rain around a very limited area on top of the hydrophone. So that's why our instrument, we only looked at the locations that we had a rain instrument on top of that, because otherwise other like far hydrophones are not able to hear rain noise.
Okay.
Dr. Mashadi.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. Can you tell how big are the groups of migration, and whether can you distinguish between I don't know, baby whales or adult whale? Can the sound distinguish that pattern?
So in terms of knowing exactly how many individuals in a group, it's hard to do that with one hydrophone, but there are some techniques that we can find the location of the source from the signal, and then we can find out if the location of this call is different from the location of the other call. So there are probably multiple individuals. So that requires localization, another signal processing algorithm to find the location of the sound. And then we have an estimate. There are also some algorithms that link the amount of energy that we record on hydrophone to the population size. Of course, it's an estimate, but it's a good estimate. A lot of times in some data collection experiments that are focused on marine mammals, there is visual observations going on also, so they can count and know the location of the animals exactly, and they can find the relationship between acoustic signal and visual observation clearly.
So I have a follow-on question for that. It seems to me that the kind of data and the patterns that you identify in the data can be a source of data for a lot of related fields. How is the soundscape that you're constructing made available to researchers who may be researching anything from meteorology to marine biology?
So that's a great question. Ocean acoustics is an interdisciplinary field, and we just provide tools, but we always work with scientists from different fields. Like for marine mammals, we need marine biologists to help us. For like earthquakes, we need seismologists to help us. So we always work, with other researchers. That's why ocean acoustics is like if you go to the conferences, you see people from very different disciplines. They're all talking about ocean noise, but from different perspective.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've seen that there's fin whales that get hit by ships and they die. Obviously, this is one good reason to study ocean traffic and ocean noise. I'm kind of curious, does the ship sounds does it get scattered in the ocean? Or I'm just wondering, if the ship is noisy, then why are these whales not hearing them?
That's a great question. The first thing, it could be that their hearing range is different from the bandwidth that ship noise is. Like fin whales, well, we don't know exactly, what their hearing range is, but we think because they're vocalizing in low frequency, they can hear low frequencies better. Ship noise are able to produce low frequencies too, but the other factor is that they are very slow because they're really big. They cannot swim as fast as ships. So a lot of times maybe they can hear, but they're not able to escape. And that's why, there are so many guidelines and regulations in terms of human activities, like for airgun activities, for example, when they start shooting air guns, there should be enough time. They cannot start, right now. It should be gradual increase to the energy, so animals have enough time to escape the area. And so there are some regulations to help for that, but a lot of times, they cannot swim as fast, so they get hit.
Okay. And of course, we're disregarding biological, histograms where there could potentially be, whales with hearing loss or something like that too.
Exactly.
Right?
That could be long-term impact of like man-made activities, that it could cause either short-term or long-term hearing injuries.
True.
Do we have other questions?
For the last, 6 years or something, there's been a slowdown of marine traffic into Vancouver, the Port of Vancouver. And the US has just, I think this year, decided to follow suit, which is surprising. It took them that long. And so I'm curious about, and that's not necessarily getting hit by ships, it's more about the ways that echolocation is used to find prey. Because, whales are very much sound focused, as we know. So that's one question I have around that is like, does that actually make substantial changes in a whale's, particularly, I guess in this case, it would not be a fin whale, it'd be an orca, so a slightly different context, around their ability to find food and or communicate with each other, just providing more noise in the environment. And then my second question is around, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I'm just a little bit familiar with it, is the use of underwater sound weapons that are being tested, particularly on the Olympic Peninsula by the US military. And I'm wondering if there's any work that you're aware of, or that some of your research techniques might be able to help shed some light on how that's impacting the whale population's ability to communicate and feed.
Sure, great questions. So about your first question, when the marine traffic goes down, there is definitely, we can see a clear impact on ambient noise that goes down. And a great example of that is during COVID, 2020 spring, when there was we were kind of like all the activities were paused, and we could see a couple of dB decrease in ambient noise. But understanding the impact of that on animals is another study that requires long-term data. But there are activities going on, like quiet ocean, for example, is an activity that is encouraging policymakers to make a specific days or month of the days of the month or days of the year to just be quiet. It could be volunteer or it could be forced. Or there are some regulations, at least in Washington, I'm not sure about British Columbia, they probably should, that in the areas that orcas are more present, or in the time that orcas are more present, the ships are, they have to go slower, and there is a limit for that. So these are all can help, definitely, but it requires more study. That's not my area to understand how much it helps. And your second question about the Navy activities, it's hard to know because most of the time the data is classified, the time of the experiments, or we don't know. But when in our data, in 6-year data, when we were processing, we were able to see some sort of activities, low frequency, mid frequency activities. But what I know that even for those activities, they need to get permits, so they need to follow the regulations and guidelines, and that's why they sponsor this type of research to understand the impact. How much it's helpful requires research, not my area, sorry.
Well,
Super helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Abadi, for your talk. It's clear that your work provides a lot of information for people to take further and help us to understand questions beyond the ones that you're asking. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.